It all started long before that night, really. I'd always been a night owl, but working third shifts at Walmart in Madison, Wisconsin, while juggling community college was another level entirely. My life felt like a constant balancing act. Tuition, rent, groceries, gas, and every little unexpected expense that popped up like weeds. After my parents' divorce, I'd moved in with my older brother, Ryan. He had a steady job and a stable apartment, but I had to pull my weight. Money wasn't just tight, it dictated almost every choice I made. That's why I kept saying yes whenever Carla, the night manager, called me in for extra shifts. Even when my body begged for sleep, I went. March nights in Madison were still chilly, the wind biting and the streets half empty after 10 p.m. I remember walking into the Walmart on East Washington Avenue that night, dragging myself past automatic doors that squeaked just a little too loud. The fluorescent lights flickered over a nearly deserted store, and that familiar smell, floor cleaner mixed with cardboard and something faintly metallic, hit me immediately. There weren't many people working the floor. Derek, Lena, and Marcus were the only ones around besides me. Derek grumbled constantly about his ex-wife and her latest drama. Lena tried to juggle her shifts with caring for her kids, and Marcus, my closest friend, spent the nights dreaming out loud about music he probably wouldn't have time to make. We joked a little about how Walmart never sleeps, but behind the laughter we all felt it, the quiet unease of night shifts. By 12:30 a.m., I was shelving home appliances in aisle 17, my head nodding off slightly despite the caffeine coursing through me. That's when I first heard it, a soft whisper, almost like someone was talking right behind the shelves. I froze for a second, then assumed it was Derek on his phone hiding somewhere I couldn't see. When I looked, though, no one was there. I told myself it was my imagination, fatigue twisting the mundane into something sinister. But then I heard it again. This time I swore it was my name. Chris. Just a faint murmur like someone had leaned in too close. My pulse picked up and I scanned the empty aisle. Nothing. The store felt suddenly larger, emptier, and every shadow stretched a little longer. "Hey man, you good?" Marcus's voice snapped me out of it. He'd joined me to unload a pallet of bottled water. "Yeah, I think I just heard someone," I admitted. Marcus frowned. "Trust me, you don't want to hear things in this store at night. Too many weirdos hang around after hours." He had a point. A few weeks earlier, a drunk guy had hidden in the garden section after closing, and another time a teenager had locked himself in the family restroom for hours. Night shifts tea came with baggage, and it seemed like every night added another story. We went outside for a smoke break around 2:15 a.m., and the parking lot was nearly empty. That's when I noticed it, a silver sedan parked far off under a broken light, engine off, a figure inside. Neither of us recognized the car or the person. Marcus shrugged it off, but I felt that same tickle of unease that had been gnawing at me all night. By the time we returned inside, Lena looked pale. "Someone's been in the women's restroom," she whispered. I heard the hand dryer going, but nobody came out. Derek checked, but the restroom was empty. Later, I'd find wet shoe prints in the toy aisle, leading out of the restroom and stopping inches from me. They weren't ours. My stomach dropped, and Marcus's eyes widened when he saw them. The rest of the night dragged on slowly, each tick of the clock loud in my ears. Every corner, every shadow, every aisle felt like it was hiding something just out of reach. I kept glancing behind me, half expecting the whispers to return. When dawn finally crept through the sliding glass doors, bringing the first customers, Derek's phone buzzed in his hand. "You guys, you need to see this," he said, voice tight. The footage showed a tall, hooded man at the end of aisle 17 around 3:48 a.m., watching me stock shelves. His posture was casual but deliberate, like he'd rehearsed the way he lingered. And when Marcus walked into the frame, the man simply vanished. No doors, no exits, no trace. Just gone. My chest tightened as I watched the clip on Derek's phone. A cold weight settled in my stomach. We weren't imagining things. Something had been in the store with us, moving silently, observing. The unease I'd felt all night was real, anchored in evidence. Later, I couldn't stop replaying the night in my mind. Every shadow, every whisper, every quiet movement in empty aisles felt amplified now. I kept thinking about the silver sedan, the restroom, the footprints, the way that figure watched without moving. It was almost worse than if he'd attacked. There was intention behind it, planning, patience. The next week, I tried to shake it off, telling myself the guy was probably gone, maybe some random trespasser. But every night when I walked the aisles, my eyes constantly flicked toward corners, shelves, and reflections in polished floors. Every stocking trip, every trip to the back room, carried the same underlying tension. What if he returned? Marcus and I talked about it occasionally, but mostly in whispers, never letting the words fully leave our lips. Derek joked about ghosts, Lena muttered prayers, but I knew better. I had seen it. I had felt it. And that sense of being watched didn't leave even after the sun came up. After that night, Walmart never felt the same. The empty aisles weren't empty anymore, and the flickering fluorescent lights seemed like eyes tracking me. I started leaving my headphones at home, paying more attention to reflections in glass and metal. Every night shift became a game of observation, a mental map of exits, shadows, and possible hiding places. Even now, years later, the memory remains vivid. The whisper of my name in the dead of night, the vanishing figure, the subtle weight of someone unseen, lurking just out of sight. The store may be brightly lit, crowded with customers, bustling with activity, but past midnight, it's still a different place. A place where the ordinary becomes strange, and the smallest sound can remind you just how vulnerable you are. A few nights later, I picked up another shift, this time determined not to let the unease control me. I arrived at Walmart around 10 p.m., dragging a hoodie over my head and carrying a fresh cup of gas station coffee. The parking lot was nearly empty again, except for a few late-night trucks near the loading docks. I shook off the lingering chill from the previous week and tried to focus on the task at hand. Inside, the store hummed quietly. Derek and Lena were already in their zones, Marcus somewhere down the electronics aisle. I started stocking shelves and toys, trying to keep my mind occupied, telling myself the previous encounter was likely a fluke. Around midnight, I caught it. A faint sound, barely audible, coming from the back of the aisle. I froze mid-step. My head jerked toward the shelves, but the aisle was empty. I leaned down to adjust a box, pretending to be busy, heart hammering in my chest. "Chris." The whisper came again, soft and deliberate. My stomach dropped. I glanced around, but no one was there. Not Derek, not Lena, not Marcus. My pulse surged. Whoever or whatever was out there knew I was alone. Marcus appeared a moment later, carrying a stack of unopened boxes. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just tired," I said, forcing a laugh. But the unease didn't leave me. We finished unloading the boxes in silence, though I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I'd see movement out of the corner of my eye. By 2 a.m., I decided to check the parking lot from the loading dock doors. It was empty, save for the distant hum of a truck leaving. I turned back inside, and that's when I noticed it. Wet footprints stretching from the employee restroom to the end of the aisle. My stomach sank. These weren't from any of us. They were fresh. Marcus leaned over. "Seriously? Those stop right here?" I nodded. Exactly where I was last week. We followed them cautiously. The prints faded into the polished floor, disappearing entirely near the end of the aisle. Whoever left them had done so deliberately, leaving no other trace. My mind raced with scenarios, all of them unsettling. The rest of the night crawled. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the lights, set my nerves on edge. Around 4 a.m., Derek rushed in holding his phone. I already knew what he'd captured before he even spoke. The CCTV footage from just after midnight. Sure enough, there he was. a hooded figure standing silently at the end of the aisle watching me. He never moved, never spoke. And just like before, when Marcus appeared, he vanished without a trace. After that night, sleep was scarce. Even outside work, I found myself looking over my shoulder, replaying the footage, imagining what would have happened if the figure hadn't disappeared. I started locking my apartment doors earlier, checking windows and walking faster to class in the mornings. A subtle paranoia settled over me, impossible to shake. The following week, Carla called me in again. I almost declined, but rent and tuition didn't wait. I arrived at Walmart at 10 p.m., the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and a chill crawling along my spine despite the warm March air outside. Derek was muttering about the slow night. Lena had a cold, and Marcus greeted me with a weak grin. Around 1 a.m., I was in the toys aisle arranging board games when I heard it, the whisper of my name again. My hands froze on the boxes. "Not this again," I muttered under my breath. I peeked around the corner and saw him, the hooded figure from the footage, just standing there, motionless, head slightly tilted as if observing. He hadn't moved an inch, yet somehow I knew he'd been watching me the entire shift. I stepped back slowly, my heart hammering. "Marcus," I whispered. He joined me instantly, eyes wide. "Dude, there he is." We didn't say much after that. Every movement we made was cautious. Every corner we passed, every shelf we approached, we checked for him. The quiet, patient terror of being watched without provocation made the night almost unbearable. Around 3 a.m., the break room phone rang unexpectedly. Derek answered, and his voice went tight. Someone's at the front door. Waving?" We rushed to the entrance, and there he was. The same hooded man, standing just outside the automatic doors. Not aggressive, not violent, just watching. I could feel the weight of his eyes even behind the glass. Carla called security immediately. Within minutes, the police arrived, but when they opened the doors, he was gone. Vanished. As if he had never existed. That night, I finally understood the lesson behind every instinct I had ignored. It wasn't just about paranoia. It was about awareness. About trusting your gut when something feels wrong, even when nothing concrete has happened yet. The shifts continued, of course. I learned to navigate the store differently, always checking corners, always aware of exits, always alert. Derek, Lena, and Marcus noticed the change, but they didn't fully understand it. There was no footage this time, no obvious signs, just the memory of that night and the faint echo of a name whispered in the dark. By the time I walked into Walmart for my next night shift, the unease had settled into a dull, constant ache. Sleep was a memory I chased but never fully caught, and every creak in my apartment, every shadow along the streets, reminded me of the hooded figure. I told myself I was being cautious, not paranoid. Still, the knots in my stomach never loosened. That night I started in electronics, methodically organizing headphones and small appliances. Marcus and Derek were elsewhere, Lena on a break. The store was quiet, almost unnervingly so. My flashlight of awareness swept every corner, every aisle end, every reflection in glass cases. And then I heard it again. My name, whispered just behind the shelves. I froze, letting my eyes adjust. There he was, the hooded man, casual posture, hands in pockets, perfectly still. My chest tightened. I realized something horrifying. He had been here before. He knew my patterns, my habits, how I moved through the store. His presence wasn't random, it was calculated. I whispered for Marcus, who had been restocking nearby. He arrived quietly, hand on the pallet jack, eyes wide. "There he is," I said under my breath. We followed him from a distance, careful to stay out of view, moving like shadows ourselves. He didn't acknowledge us. He wasn't frantic, nervous, or hiding. He simply observed, a predator in a crowd, blending seamlessly into the fluorescent-lit aisles. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then, near the loading docks, he paused, glancing briefly toward the security cameras. I realized he knew exactly how to manipulate the environment, staying in blind spots and lingering just long enough to make his presence felt but not caught. "Call security," I muttered to Marcus. He nodded, dialing quietly. By the time the store's official security arrived, the man had disappeared, gone through doors we didn't see him use, vanishing into the dark parking lot like smoke. I walked to the break room, knees weak, and sank into a chair. Marcus sat beside me, silent. Derek and Lena returned from their breaks, faces pale. We exchanged glances that said more than words ever could. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every night shift became a game of awareness, strategy, and preparation. I started documenting every incident, every suspicious detail, learning to trust my instincts. I realized that caution didn't make me weak. It made me alert, responsible, and alive. It's easy to dismiss fear when nothing has happened, to convince yourself that imagination is overactive, that paranoia is irrational. But the world has subtle threats, people who blend into ordinary spaces, acting with quiet intent. Trust your instincts, stay aware, and never assume safety simply because the environment seems mundane. Working nights at Walmart taught me more than stocking shelves. It taught me vigilance. It taught me the value of observation, preparation, and respect for intuition. And most importantly, it taught me that the scariest dangers aren't always loud or obvious. They're quiet, patient, and just out of view. Even now, years later, I carry that lesson with me. Every dark aisle, every empty parking lot, every late-night errand reminds me, safety isn't about luck. It's about awareness, action, and trusting yourself when something feels wrong. Because in the quietest moments, when the world seems safe and still, danger can be standing right behind you, or whispering your name from just beyond the shelves. Always trust your instincts and stay aware of your surroundings. Danger often comes quietly, in places and situations that feel safe. Preparedness, vigilance, and intuition can protect you more than luck ever will. I've always been the kind of person who notices details others overlook. Maybe it comes from years of working odd jobs and juggling responsibilities, or maybe it's just the way I survive. That night in Boise, Idaho, at the Walmart on West Overland Road, I was about 12 hours into my overnight shift, and my mind was already frayed from a week of late shifts and life's little chaos. I'd been working there for about a year, mostly to keep things steady after my mom's medical bills piled up. Dad had walked out when I was 15, leaving me the oldest to shoulder the quiet responsibilities of adulthood while still barely scraping by. I never expected a normal life, but I didn't expect nights like this either. The rain was hammering against the glass doors, a steady drum that made every creak and shuffle inside the store echo like a warning. The parking lot glistened under the harsh streetlights, slick with water and empty except for the occasional car. I was manning the customer service counter, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through my phone, trying to keep myself awake, when the store phone rang. "Walmart, how can I help you?" I answered automatically. The voice on the other end was slow, deliberate, chilling in its casualness. "Are you open?" "Yes, 24/7. Do you need directions?" I tried to keep the conversation normal. A pause, then a faint chuckle. "No, I can see you." I froze, my instincts spiking. My eyes shifted to the front doors, and through the rain, I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the lot, holding his phone like it was a weapon of sorts. He didn't move, didn't wave. He just waited. I forced a professional tone. "Sir, if you need assistance, you can come inside." And he did. The doors hissed open, and he walked in, soaked from head to toe. His jacket clung to him, water dripping onto the tiles. He didn't greet me, didn't introduce himself. He just stared, and the intensity in his gaze made me step back slightly. "I can help you with something?" I asked, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "I need a gift," he said, flat, empty, like someone reading words off a script. Okay. What kind of gift? Electronics? Clothes? Toys? Something for her. He interrupted. Something about his calm, deliberate manner set off a warning in my gut. Who's her? My wife, he said, his lips twisting in a way that almost seemed like a smile but wasn't. Used to shop here. I rang him up for a small bouquet from the floral section, trying to keep things simple, but when he slid his card, it declined. He didn't flinch, didn't pause, just stared. Sir, do you have another card? I asked, voice tighter than I realized. Silence. Then a low whisper. She's here tonight, isn't she? I swallowed hard. I don't know what you mean. He turned and began walking calmly toward the back aisles near groceries. My pulse skyrocketed. At 3 a.m., the store was practically empty. Just me, Rachel in electronics, and Hector mopping near the deli. I pressed the small black security button under the counter and ran after him. By the time I reached the locked employee-only corridor, he was pounding on the door, yanking at the handle like it would give in to sheer determination. Open up. I know you're in there. I ran for help. Hector, call the cops. When the police arrived, he was still clawing at the door, muttering a woman's name, Rachel's middle name, Claire. The man was her ex-husband, someone she hadn't spoken to in 10 years, and somehow, some way, he had tracked her down. Even after he was detained, my chest felt tight every time the doors hissed open. The world suddenly felt smaller, colder, and less predictable than I had ever noticed before. The next week, I couldn't shake it. Every time I walked through the empty store at night, I scanned the aisles like a predator might scan its territory. I replayed every detail of his movements, the slow, purposeful walk, the empty stare, the way he targeted the employee-only corridor, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. I had worked security before, but nothing in my training could prepare me for the feeling of calculated intent that man carried. Rachel tried to joke about it a few days later. Well, that was fun, huh? Her laugh was hollow, but I understood why she said it. She needed to feel normal again. I didn't respond. I went back to my routines, but I was different now. I checked cameras more obsessively, noticed exits, stairwells, and parking lot blind spots. Every unfamiliar car outside made me tense. Every reflection in the tile floors set my nerves on edge. It wasn't paranoia, it was learned vigilance. The man had shown me how fragile the illusion of safety could be, even in a place designed to be mundane, predictable, and public. A few nights later, around 1:30 a.m., I spotted someone standing near the far end of the lot. It wasn't him, but I stopped and stared anyway. My heart was pounding, hands tightening around the edge of the counter. My colleagues noticed. "You okay?" Rachel asked. I nodded, forcing a smile, but the truth was the tension didn't leave. Not really. I started keeping logs of incidents. Small things at first. Strange behavior, people loitering near entrances, customers who seemed too curious about the back areas. Management appreciated the reports, but no one truly understood the weight it carried. Every scribbled note reminded me of him. The man who didn't just follow instructions. He followed intentions. The scariest part wasn't what he had done, it was what he almost did. That realization stayed with me. Every time the doors hissed, I expected him to be back, to have learned, to be ready for another attempt. And in that stillness of night, surrounded by fluorescent light and endless aisles, I understood that vigilance wasn't just about noticing, it was about anticipating. It was nearly 2 weeks after the initial incident with Rachel's ex-husband when I started noticing the patterns. Every night during my shift, I watched the parking lot through the security cameras, scanning for shadows, movement, anything out of the ordinary. Most nights, it was quiet. Too quiet. And that in itself felt dangerous. The store had a skeleton crew at night, just a handful of employees, and that made me painfully aware of how exposed we were. One night around 2:45 a.m., I spotted someone lingering near the side entrance by the garden section. At first I thought it was a delivery driver or maybe a regular shopper returning a forgotten item. But something about the way he leaned against the railing, eyes scanning the lot like a predator, set every alarm in my head off at once. I grabbed the walkie-talkie and quietly checked with Hector, who was in produce. Anyone near the garden entrance? You see a pause, then a muffled phone. Yeah, just a guy standing there. I think he's, looking at his. I nodded to myself, though he couldn't see me. Keep an eye, but don't engage. I'm coming. I walked through the store deliberately, casual but alert, pretending to stock shelves as I approached the aisle leading to the side door. By the time I reached the entrance, the man was gone. No car, no trace, just a faint imprint of wet footprints where he had been. My pulse was racing. He was testing, probing, seeing how long it would take me to notice. The following nights, I started noticing more incidents like that. People who didn't look like customers but wandered the aisles in odd ways. Some would strike up conversations with employees, asking strange questions about the layout or pointing out areas hidden from most shoppers. Others would simply loiter near exits, watching. I began to keep detailed logs of each event. Date, time, location, description, behavior. One night, a man approached me at the customer service counter. Mid-40s, unkempt jacket, hands shoved into his pockets. "You work security here?" he asked casually. "Yes," I said, tense. "Can I help you?" He smiled, a practiced, empty smile. "Place is safe." Just checking on things, you know, making sure the eye stared at him, trying to gauge if this was the same pattern I'd been seeing. But before I could react, he wandered down an aisle, not shopping, not interacting with anyone, just moving slowly, observing. I pressed the black security button under the counter, but he was gone by the time backup arrived. It was becoming clear. Someone, or more than one someone, was testing our responses, probing for weakness. Every time the automatic doors hissed, I expected them to be there. Every unremarkable person walking past the registers could be a threat. I started coordinating with management, suggesting increased patrols, better camera coverage, and procedural checks for anyone loitering. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. We couldn't predict the next move, but we could make sure it wouldn't catch us completely off guard. And even as the adrenaline faded each morning when the store quieted down, the tension remained. Vigilance had become routine, and I had started noticing details I would have previously ignored. The exact angle of someone's approach, the tilt of a head, a too quick glance toward the exits. I was learning the rhythm of subtle danger. The night of the most unsettling encounter came quietly, without warning. It was around 1:30 a.m., and the store was nearly empty. I had just finished restocking hygiene products when the automatic doors hissed. I looked up. A man was standing there, soaked from earlier rain, hands shoved into his pockets, staring with that same hollow intensity I had seen weeks before. My stomach dropped. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just browsing," he said. Then, without moving toward the main aisles, he drifted casually toward the back, near the employee-only storage. I followed slowly, keeping a safe distance. My heart thudded. This was the behavior I'd been tracking. Calm, deliberate, testing the boundaries. My mind raced through options. I could confront him, but if he was dangerous, I didn't want to provoke him. I could lock down sections of the store, but I needed evidence. I pressed the security button and called Daniel in asset protection, explaining the situation. He arrived within minutes, moving quietly through the aisles. The man didn't notice. He wandered, paused, and then suddenly walked past electronics, seasonal decor, and toward the exits. It felt like he was performing some kind of rehearsal. Daniel and I tracked him outside through the cameras. By the time we reached the doors, he was gone. No car, no person, nothing, just the quiet aftermath of his presence. After that night, I realized we were dealing with someone who thrived on observation and intimidation. He didn't need to threaten physically to unsettle the staff. His presence alone was enough. It changed the atmosphere of the store, and it changed me. Vigilance had become second nature. I noticed shadows where they shouldn't be, felt unease when someone loitered near a corner, double-checked exits and blind spots. Even off duty, I found myself scanning parking lots, wondering if someone was following a routine similar to his. Sleep was restless, always half-watching, always alert. I knew that in these small, mundane spaces, stores, aisles, parking lots, people could hide intent behind casual facades, and it became clear. Knowing the threat didn't remove it. Awareness didn't make it vanish. But preparation and vigilance could limit its impact. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel amplified. I was midway through my shift, restocking the household aisle when the store felt off. Not chaotic, not noisy, just wrong in a way I couldn't shake. My gut tightened. The automatic doors hissed open, and my pulse jumped. A man stepped in, tall, soaked from the drizzle outside, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, staring at me with that same hollow intensity I had learned to recognize. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He just existed in the space, surveying everything and nothing all at once. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral but firm. He tilted his head slightly, like he was reading me for some hidden weakness. "I'm just looking," he said flat. But I didn't buy it. Every instinct screamed that this was the same pattern I'd been observing for weeks. Calm, deliberate, calculated. He wasn't shopping. He was testing. I pressed the black security button under the counter, signaling Daniel. Within minutes, he arrived, moving quietly but assertively through the store. I kept a safe distance behind the man as he drifted past aisles, lingering, pretending to inspect items. He paused near electronics, glanced toward the employee-only doors, then moved on without any sign of agitation. My heart raced. I realized then that this wasn't about confrontation. This was about control, about intimidation, about creating fear without a single word raised. I stayed calm, following procedures, calling for backup when needed, documenting every move. By now, the man was near the seasonal decor, and the faintest hint of frustration flickered across his face. He wasn't expecting an audience, a witness who wouldn't flinch. Daniel intercepted him near the front aisles, asking him to step aside for a check. He hesitated, then slowly complied. I watched, tense but relieved, as Daniel escorted him outside while other staff secured entrances and exits. Police were on standby and arrived shortly after. That night, we finally got answers. The man had been roaming, looking for patterns, studying the store layout, and testing reactions. No merchandise had been taken, no employee harmed. But the fear he instilled had been enough to disrupt our routines and make the familiar feel unpredictable. Afterward, I sat down in the empty store, lights buzzing softly overhead. My hands were still shaking. I realized something vital. The world wasn't inherently safe. Danger often didn't announce itself with aggression or obvious threats. Sometimes it came quietly, subtly, almost politely. And the only thing that stood between ordinary life and chaos was vigilance, preparation, and trust in one's instincts. I also thought about Rachel, the other staff, and the countless shoppers who would never know how close some moments came to becoming dangerous. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about awareness, about seeing the ordinary world clearly, noticing the small signals, and acting before it's too late. From that point on, procedures changed. Security presence was increased. Staff were trained to recognize subtle warning signs. Cameras were repositioned to cover blind spots. I kept my logs updated, detailed and precise, a record of what could go wrong and how to prevent it. I still think about him sometimes, the hollow stare, the calm approach, the way he tested boundaries without a single word of threat. He taught me a lesson the hard way. The ordinary can hide danger, and safety is never guaranteed. Vigilance and awareness aren't about fear. They're about respect for the unpredictability of life. Danger doesn't always announce it's trusting your instincts. Ordinary people in ordinary spaces can become heroes simply by noticing what's out of place and acting responsibly. Safety isn't luck, it's deliberate, careful attention. I still remember moving to Flagstaff like it was yesterday, even though it's been years. After Mom passed away, I felt like the world had quietly shifted on its axis. Dad was gone, and I had a younger sister, Jenna, in college. She was smart, stubborn, and fiercely independent, but she was still my little sister. I wanted to be close, to make sure she didn't feel alone. Flagstaff was small, cold in winter, and full of people who looked past you if you didn't fit the scenery. Money was tight, bills never ending, so when the Walmart Supercenter on Woodlands Village BLVD offered me night shifts, I jumped at it. The night crew was an odd mix, but somehow we made it work. Angela, tired but sharp, could make the worst midnight shift feel tolerable with her dry humor. Devin, the quiet mechanic type, never overshared, but his steady presence grounded the team. Milo, who was trying to save for travel after dropping out of college, was always talking about some far-off country he'd one day visit. I wasn't close with any of them, not really, but there was a rhythm to our shifts, an unspoken understanding that the store could get weird after midnight, and we had each other's backs. Winter nights in Flagstaff were long and cold. The store lights reflected off the snow in a way that made the aisles look endless and empty. Weeks before, someone had vandalized the men's restroom mirror with red paint. The cameras hadn't caught a thing. Another night, a stranger had been found hiding in the garden section, bundled under tarps. No one knew why, and it rattled the crew for days. The store always had an undercurrent of unease after hours, like the walls themselves held secrets. That February night, the air inside the store felt heavy. By 10:45 p.m., the last few stragglers had left, and we started our routine. Stocking, checking aisles, sweeping floors. Around 12:30 a.m., Angela asked for help moving a pallet of soda in aisle 19. The aisle was quiet, too quiet. As he pushed the cart, I swore I heard footsteps behind me. The space was empty. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was the echo of the cartwheels against the tiles. Devin leaned against a shelf and muttered, "Stores always sound haunted. Don't let this place get in your head. Big empty." I smiled weakly but didn't answer. The truth was I'd grown accustomed to the small, unsettling things, the shadows, the echoes, the unshakable feeling that someone was watching even when no one was there. The night shift changed the way you saw the world. Everything ordinary could be slightly off, every sound amplified. By 2 a.m., fatigue settled into our bones. Milo suggested grabbing a bite at the diner down the road. I wanted to go home, collapse on my bed, but the thought of sitting in silence made me hesitate. I agreed reluctantly. For a while at least, the warmth and chatter of the diner felt like a shield against the long, empty hours of the store. We clocked out around 2:10 a.m., stepping into the dimly lit parking lot. Snow was piled in corners, crunching under our boots. That's when my gut clenched. A beat-up white pickup truck sat far away, its lights off. Nobody from our crew drove that, and I couldn't shake the unease. "Sketchy," Angela said, her tone low. "Let's just go." We piled into our cars and drove to the diner. The fluorescent lights and smell of frying food made the world feel a little safer, more human. We laughed, trying to shake off the tension, but I couldn't help sneaking glances at the door. That instinctive awareness had become automatic after weeks of late-night shifts. Minutes later, the door swung open. 2 men entered, heavy jackets, hoods pulled low, clothes wet. They didn't order anything. They sat at the counter, their eyes slowly scanning the diner, occasionally settling on us. One locked eyes with Angela, and I felt a chill. "Ignore it," she whispered. "Creeps always find me." She explained that her ex had been stalking her even with a restraining order, and that she never truly felt safe. I tried to nod, but tension coiled tight in my chest. Devin's eyes narrowed. "They're waiting for something," he murmured. The silence between us grew heavier as we finished our food, trying to appear casual. But every instinct screamed danger. When we stood to leave, one of the men made a slow, deliberate gesture across his throat. Panic flared. My fingers fumbled for my phone. Angela froze, whispering, "That's his voice." My ex. My stomach sank. Outside, snow crunched underfoot. The diner lot was nearly empty. The men followed at a distance, their intent unmistakable. Devin guided Angela toward her car while I stayed behind, calling 911. Headlights swept across the lot. Police. And the two men vanished into the dark before they could reach us. Later, the report revealed that Angela's ex had been violent, and somehow, against all odds, he had tracked her to Flagstaff. The night had taught me something I didn't expect. The scariest moments weren't inside the store or in the silent aisles, but in the ordinary spaces outside where danger could wait quietly, patiently, and with terrifying familiarity. The next few nights were tense. Even though nothing had happened inside the store, the image of those two men outside the diner lingered in my mind. Every time I clocked in, I noticed small details I'd never paid attention to before. The way the automatic doors clicked, shadows pooling in corners, or the subtle sounds of carts scraping tiles. The store felt different now, as if it knew what had happened outside and held its breath with me. Angela came in with dark circles under her eyes. "I didn't sleep a wink," she admitted, fidgeting with her name tag. "I keep expecting him to show up. I know he can't, but my gut won't listen." I nodded, understanding the fear that hadn't left her in months. This wasn't paranoia. It was instinct, honed by experience and past trauma. That night I was assigned to the garden and seasonal aisles, a section with wide open spaces but only a few cameras. As I restocked shelves, the store was empty except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Every so often, a distant clang or squeak made me flinch. I kept a hand on my phone, ready to call if anything seemed off. Devin approached with a cart, moving quietly. Shook my head, but my eyes scanned the shadows like a hawk. "You notice anything weird tonight?" he asked. You ever get the feeling someone's watching you even when no one's there?" I asked, half joking. He looked at me deadpan. "Every night. You just get used to it. But some things, you can't ignore." I remembered Angela's story, how her ex had found her despite legal boundaries, despite distance. The thought chilled me. I realized that threat didn't need to speak, didn't need to act aggressively. It just needed to exist. And that was more frightening than any loud confrontation. Around 1:45 a.m., a movement caught my eye near the back exit. A shadow shifted, disappearing behind a shelf. I froze, heart thudding, then realized it was just a stray mannequin. Still, the sense of unease didn't dissipate. That night, we implemented stricter routines, always walking in pairs, double-checking doors, keeping the walkie close, and ensuring no employee walked alone near entrances after midnight. By the end of the shift, the tension hadn't left, but the teamwork helped. Milo joked about ghost hunters in the empty store, and I laughed along, but the unease lingered. I knew deep down that the real danger wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, deliberate, lurking in ordinary spaces where you least expected it. A week later, Angela came in late for her shift, looking pale and distracted. "He called me," she whispered as we clocked in. My stomach sank. Not a prank call. Her voice trembled. She showed me her phone. The number was unlisted. The message was simple but chilling. "You can't hide forever." The night crew gathered, tension palpable. Devin adjusted his sleeves. Milo muttered something about security cameras. And I realized our casual routines wouldn't cut it anymore. We needed vigilance, coordination, and a plan. We rotated responsibilities, ensuring no one walked the aisles alone, and established a system of check-ins every 20 minutes. I monitored the store entrances like a hawk, noting every vehicle in the lot, every unfamiliar figure on the sidewalks. Every creak of the doors, every distant footstep felt amplified. Around 2:30 a.m., a car pulled into the lot, a black sedan, tinted windows, engine idling. My pulse quickened. Devin and I exchanged glances. Milo called out, "New customer?" But his voice wavered. I grabbed the walkie, reporting to the rest of the crew. The car stayed for a few minutes, then left. We never saw the driver inside. Angela was shaking. "It's like he's testing us," she said softly. I nodded. That was exactly what I feared. Someone observing, studying, waiting for a misstep. The threat wasn't about force. It was about control. The night dragged on. Every aisle, every corner, every shadow felt like a possible trap. I realized how much fear could alter perception, heightening awareness, sharpening senses, and teaching lessons you couldn't learn any other way. By the end of the shift, we were exhausted but alive. The black sedan, the messages, the lurking presence, they hadn't succeeded, but they had left an indelible mark. We couldn't go back to our previous sense of normalcy. Vigilance wasn't paranoia. It was survival. A few nights later, I arrived at the store earlier than usual. The snow from the previous week had mostly melted, leaving icy patches that glittered under the streetlights. The lot was empty except for a single delivery truck, and the familiar hum of the fluorescent lights welcomed me. But I couldn't shake the tension in my chest. Angela had requested the night off, and I knew she needed space, but that left Devin, Milo, and me alone for the quietest, loneliest hours. Around 12:15 a.m., the front doors hissed open. My pulse spiked before I even turned to look. A man stepped in, soaking wet, wearing a dark hood and a long coat. He didn't look at anything on the shelves. He only scanned the store, slow, deliberate, like he was memorizing every corner. My stomach tightened. I instinctively reached for the small black button under the counter that would silently alert police. I called over the walkie to Devin and Milo. "Heads up. We've got a visitor. Don't engage unless necessary." The man wandered near the back aisles, not pretending to shop, his gaze empty yet calculating. I stayed calm, maintaining a professional demeanor, but every muscle in my body was on edge. I remembered Angela's story, the fear, the creeping dread of someone who knows too much about you. Minutes passed, each stretching into eternity. He stopped near the seasonal aisle and slowly removed something from his coat, a folded piece of paper. I realized it was a list of names, some crossed out, some circled. My heart pounded. This wasn't random. He wasn't here for merchandise. He was here for control, for observation. Devin and I slowly approached, keeping our distance. "Sir, can I help you find something?" I asked, voice steady despite the adrenaline. He didn't answer immediately. Then he looked at me, his eyes hollow, and whispered, "I just need to know where she is." The hair on my arms stood on end. The name wasn't hers, but the intent was the same as Angela's ex. Targeted, precise, and terrifying. I hit the silent alarm. Milo, who had circled behind him, blocked the exit aisle. Within minutes, sirens echoed through the empty streets outside, red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. The man bolted toward the back exit. Police officers intercepted him before he could reach the lot. He struggled, but the officers held firm. As they led him away, his gaze lingered on the store, as if marking it for the future. We all exhaled simultaneously, the tension finally breaking. My hands shook, my chest still thudding, but I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Angela's absence weighed on my mind, but I knew she was safe for the night, just as we had made ourselves a coordinated shield against the threat. In the aftermath, the store management upgraded the security cameras, instituted stricter nighttime protocols, and made sure every employee had a buddy system. But more than anything, I realized the lessons weren't about cameras or alarms. They were about awareness, caution, and listening to your instincts. Over the following weeks, I noticed subtle changes in everyone's behavior. Devin stayed closer to high-traffic aisles. Milo carried pepper spray in his pocket, and Angela, when she returned, walked with quiet confidence. Fear had reshaped us, but it had also sharpened our senses. We weren't powerless. That night, and all the nights afterward, I carried one lesson with me. Danger often doesn't announce itself loudly. It hides in plain sight, in shadows, in ordinary spaces where you least expect it. Awareness, vigilance, and the courage to act, even in the mundane, can be the difference between safety and harm. The scariest threats aren't the ones that scream. They're the ones that wait quietly, learning your patterns, waiting for a lapse, and exploiting it. And sometimes, surviving them isn't about bravery. It's about being smart, prepared, and aware every single day. Vigilance, awareness, and trusting your instincts are crucial in everyday life. Danger often hides in ordinary places, and the quiet, subtle threats, those who study, stalk, or manipulate, can be the most dangerous. Preparedness, teamwork, and paying attention to the smallest details can prevent harm and keep both yourself and others safe. I was 22 years old, juggling part-time work at Walmart and taking care of my mom and younger brother Caleb. Life hadn't been easy ever since my dad left when I was 14. Mom had been struggling with her health for years, and I had picked up late shifts at Walmart to keep the bills paid and food on the table. My coworkers often joked that the late shift came with its own characters, and sometimes that wasn't far from the truth. I started that Friday evening tired from a week of work and errands. By the time my shift began at 4 p.m., I was already running on fumes. The store had its usual chaos: carts clattering, toddlers crying, customers arguing over coupons. I liked working because it kept my mind off things. But the late hours in the emptying store always felt heavier than the noise suggested. Earlier that week, Jenna, a co-worker who had worked nights longer than anyone else, warned me. "Aisle 17, she said, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Don't stay there after 10 p.m. People say they've seen a woman just standing there staring at the cameras." I laughed it off at first, thinking it was a joke to scare the new kids, but her tone made me pause. She wasn't joking. She explained how she had caught the reflection in freezer glass, and when she turned to check, no one was there. That story lingered in my mind all week. By 10:45 p.m. that night, I was already drained. A drunk customer had thrown a fit in electronics hours earlier, and the self-checkout had frozen, earning me a lecture from a frustrated shopper. My feet ached, my head throbbed, and all I wanted was to punch out. Instead, the manager asked me to restock cleaning supplies in aisle 17. My stomach sank. The aisle was long, fluorescent lit, and quiet. Boxes of bleach and detergents lined the shelves like a fortress. As I bent down to stack the first box, I thought I saw movement at the far end. A woman stood perfectly still, her back to me. She wore a gray hoodie, hair tangled and dark. For a moment, I thought she was a shopper, frozen by indecision. I called out politely. I glanced again. She was gone. "Ma'am, let me know if you need help finding anything." No response. When shivering, I tried to focus on my work, but then I caught the reflection in the shiny metal of the shopping cart. The woman, standing silently behind me. My heart jumped into my throat. I spun around. Empty aisle. I shoved the final box onto the shelf, muttering to myself that I must be imagining things. Still, my pulse didn't slow as I pushed the cart out of aisle 17. I glanced toward the registers where Jenna gave me a knowing look. "You saw her, didn't you?" she asked softly. I nodded once, unable to speak. After that night, I couldn't shake the image of the woman. It wasn't the usual fear of empty aisles or shadows. It was something colder, something that felt like she had been waiting for me, watching, calculating. I started noticing little things in the store that had gone unnoticed before. The faint hum in the fluorescent lights, the echoes of carts that didn't belong, the way the aisle corners seemed to stretch longer at night. The following week, I tried to avoid aisle 17 entirely. I volunteered for price checks in other departments, stocked shelves in busy aisles, anything to keep a barrier between myself and that stretch of fluorescent light. But the manager didn't let me off easily, and eventually I was back there again. Another late Friday. It was almost midnight. Most of the store was empty except for the occasional customer wandering between aisles, their carts squeaking. I was restocking laundry detergents, carefully placing bottles in neat rows. That's when I saw her again. At the far end, motionless, dark hoodie concealing her face. Her stance was unnatural, too stiff to be anyone browsing. I froze. My mouth went dry. "Ma'am?" I called, voice wavering. No reply. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was a mannequin, maybe a reflection, but my instincts screamed otherwise. Every fiber of my body told me something wasn't right. I slowly stepped toward the aisle, heart hammering in my chest, and she vanished. The chill crawling up my arms felt like it was more than cold air. It was a presence. I caught myself checking the reflections on the freezer glass again. There she was, behind me. I spun. Empty aisle. My pulse spiked, and a bead of sweat slid down my temple. I tried to keep moving calmly, but the boxes felt heavier, and every sound seemed magnified. When I finally made it to the registers, Jenna's expression told me everything I needed to know. She had seen her before, too. My own fear reflected back in her knowing eyes. That night, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't volunteer for the night shift again. Not for anything. Even as I left the store, the fluorescent lights casting shadows across the empty parking lot, I felt her watching. Always at the edge of perception, always just out of reach. A few nights later, I returned to Walmart, reluctantly taking my shift. My mom was resting, Caleb was asleep, and I had no choice but to cover the late hours. The memory of aisle 17 clung to me like a shadow. Every step in the store felt heavier. The fluorescent hum sounded louder, echoing in my chest like a warning drum. By 11 p.m., the store had emptied considerably. I was restocking paper towels in a quieter aisle when I noticed a customer wandering too close to aisle 17. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to concentrate on my work, but every instinct screamed to watch that aisle. I moved toward it just to glance and froze. The woman was there again, standing perfectly still at the end, hoodie concealing her face. I could feel her eyes on me even if I couldn't see them. My throat went dry, and I could hear my own heartbeat in the quiet. I called out, "Ma'am, you need help finding something?" My voice sounded small. She didn't move. The emptiness around her felt suffocating. I considered leaving, but curiosity and fear rooted me to the spot. Slowly, I pushed the cart down the aisle, boxes rattling under my hands. The moment I approached halfway, she disappeared again, leaving only the echo of her presence. I ran to Jenna at the registers, voice shaking. "She's here again. I swear she's real." Jenna didn't argue. She simply said, "Just keep your distance, don't engage." But distance was impossible. Every night she seemed to know where I would be, appearing when I least expected it. I started noticing strange reflections in the polished floors, a movement that wasn't mine, shadows that lingered at corners. Even when I left, I could feel her presence in the echo of the store's automatic doors. I began leaving earlier, cutting down my shifts whenever I could. Yet something in me, some mixture of curiosity and fear, compelled me to stay long enough to watch, to see what she wanted, why she was there. Each night she appeared, perfectly still, her presence unsettling in its silent, almost purposeful nature. One night I decided I couldn't just run anymore. I had to understand what was happening. I clocked in at 10 p.m., convincing myself it was just a stressful job playing tricks on me. But the moment I pushed a cart toward aisle 17, my stomach twisted. She was there again, at the end of the aisle, hoodie low, arms hanging by her sides. Her stillness was unnatural, almost deliberate. I swallowed hard. "Ma'am, you can't just stand here. It's not safe," I said, trying to maintain a calm tone. Her head tilted slightly, just enough for me to feel that her eyes met mine. And then she moved, slowly, deliberately, one step toward me. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away. I decided I needed backup. I ran to the front, explaining the situation to the manager. There's someone in aisle 17. She's not shopping, she just stands there, watching. There's the manager, half annoyed, agreed to come with me. When we returned, the aisle was empty, not a sign of anyone. My pulse didn't slow. Something about her presence lingered, like a cold breath in the back of the store. That night I started documenting what I saw. Dates, times, movements, everything. It became a routine. She appeared almost every shift after 10 p.m., never engaging, never speaking, just observing. A week later, a new employee asked if I wanted to work nights with her. I flatly refused. I couldn't explain it to anyone who hadn't seen her. It wasn't just fear. It was a sense of calculated patience, like she was waiting for something, waiting for me to slip, to make a mistake. By the end of the month, I had convinced myself that aisle 17 was cursed or haunted, or at least that my mind had convinced me of it. But the reflection of her eyes in the metal cart, the way she always seemed one step ahead, that was real. I've always been the type to overthink, a trait my friends lovingly mock and my professors occasionally exploit. Balancing graduate school, 2 part-time jobs, and a social life that barely exists, I often find my thoughts tangled in deadlines and obligations. But there's another layer to it, one I never talk about much. A lingering unease in spaces that are usually considered ordinary, everyday places. It's not anxiety in the clinical sense, more like an instinct I can't explain, an alert that hums quietly in the back of my mind. That Saturday night started innocuously enough. Ethan and I had left a small get-together at a friend's apartment. I was already tired from a long week, my shoulders stiff from carrying textbooks and grocery bags like a human mule. Ethan, ever the optimist, suggested we stop by Walmart to grab snacks before heading home. I hesitated at first. Late-night Walmart runs have never been my favorite, especially when the parking lots are poorly lit and the aisles echo with emptiness. But Ethan's easy smile and casual reassurance, "It's just Walmart, not a crime scene," won me over. We pulled into the lot around 12:40 a.m., the fluorescent glow inside the store contrasting sharply with the slick darkness outside. The lot was nearly empty, puddles reflecting the harsh yellow of street lamps and the occasional red tail light of a distant car. My stomach twisted in a knot, an instinctual warning I tried to dismiss. "It's fine," I muttered to myself, following Ethan toward the sliding doors. Inside, the store was almost deserted. The usual hum of refrigerated units and buzzing fluorescent lights seemed louder in the absence of shoppers. It was the kind of silence that presses down on your chest if you let yourself notice it. We moved past the frozen food section when I caught sight of him. A man in a gray hoodie, hands twitching, pacing back and forth like he was having a conversation with someone invisible. His eyes flicked toward me repeatedly, and even as I tried to focus on the aisle ahead, a chill crept over my skin. Ethan glanced at him and shrugged. "Ignore him," he said, though his voice didn't carry the same calm it usually did. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but instinct sharpened every small detail, the twitch of his fingers, the way his gaze lingered too long. Every aisle we turned into, I noticed him subtly moving closer. And then, a woman with tangled hair and a stained jacket appeared near the bleach section, standing frozen, staring as if lost in some private trance. My voice barely whispered to Ethan, "Something feels off. Let's just pay and go." He nodded, but I could see his own unease flicker in the shadows of his eyes. By the time we reached the self-checkout, my hands shook as I scanned our snacks. I kept glancing over my shoulder, seeing the man now leaning casually against an empty cart, eyes locked on me. There's something about being watched that makes the skin crawl. A slow, suffocating pressure you can't shake. I wanted to hurry, to leave, but every movement felt measured, calculated. I tried to remind myself it was late, that people could be odd without being dangerous. But instinct knows better. We stepped outside into the night, and the rain-slick asphalt mirrored the street lamps, creating distorted reflections that made the lot feel larger and emptier than it already was. Relief washed over me briefly, until I saw them. The man striding toward us purposeful, and the wild-haired woman trailing, awkward and jerky, trying to tug at our car door. My heart lurched violently, and I clutched the keys like a lifeline. Ethan reached for the driver's side, trying to talk to the man. "We don't have anything, calm down," he said. But the man's voice rose, insistent and threatening. "Don't lie to me, then I'll take your wallet." Fear is strange. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it coils quietly in your chest, making your muscles tense and your mind race in seconds. I shoved the car into reverse, tires squealing on wet asphalt, Ethan shouting directions as we maneuvered past the looming figures. Every instinct screamed to go faster, to escape. And yet, I felt a surreal detachment, observing my own body reacting before I fully realized it. We didn't stop until the bright, unyielding lights of the Flint Police Department filled our vision. The sense of safety was immediate, though faint. Our terror hadn't evaporated. It had simply found a temporary sanctuary. Inside, the officer listened with what felt like minimal concern. "Yeah, we've had trouble with them hanging around before," he said casually, shrugging off the intensity of our encounter. The casual dismissal was more frightening than the men themselves. I realized in that moment that danger doesn't always come with immediacy or resolution. Driving home, my chest still tight, I tried to process the event. We spoke in hushed tones, recounting the precise movements and expressions of the strangers. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing, and I drew comfort from his presence. But even in the warmth of companionship, I couldn't shake the impression that we had encountered something that could have gone differently in the blink of an eye. And for the first time in a long time, I understood the weight of vigilance, how it presses into your life quietly, reshaping the way you move through the world. Weeks later, I found myself thinking about it constantly. I began noticing patterns in ordinary spaces, scanning aisles before fully trusting the presence of others. A late-night convenience store run felt different. A trip to the library became an exercise in awareness. The unnerving thing about strangers isn't always the threat. They may never act. But the knowledge that someone could act, and that your life depends on noticing the subtleties, is heavy. It was during another late-night Walmart visit, this time with my daughter Ava, that the same uneasy sensation returned. Her oversized glasses reflected the overhead lights, and her innocent curiosity, the kind that makes strangers smile, made me realize how vulnerable she could be. A man approached, casual, smiling softly, pointing her toward the back of the store as though sharing a harmless tip. My stomach flipped. The casualness was deliberate, rehearsed. I stepped forward calmly, guiding Ava's small hand in mine. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of comprehension, a recognition of subtle danger. Even after leaving the store, the unease lingered. I called her school, asked about stranger danger lessons, and watched her responses closely. I explained in simple terms that not all danger looks like a monster, that sometimes it comes in the form of a friendly voice, a baseball cap, or a casual gesture. Teaching her vigilance felt like armor, a way to equip her without stealing her innocence. Months passed, and I took other precautions. Dash cams, careful parking, a mental checklist for public places. Each decision, seemingly small, locking doors immediately, keeping shopping trips short, staying alert in the presence of strangers, was a conscious act of survival. Work as a night security contractor had taught me that vigilance isn't paranoia, it's practice. Every observation, every instinctive pause could prevent disaster. I carried that lesson into personal life, extending it to family, friends, even casual acquaintances. The memories of that night stayed vivid. Even mundane errands became exercises in awareness. I noticed patterns in the way people move, the way the mind can trick you into underestimating ordinary threats. I realized how quickly normality can bend into something frightening, and how ordinary locations, stores, parking lots, quiet streets, can transform in an instant when someone chooses to exploit the inattentive. Looking back now, I recognize that fear has a dual nature. It is at once debilitating and protective, shaping behavior while preserving life. I remain cautious, aware of the shadows that linger even in bright, familiar places. But I also understand something crucial. Vigilance, empathy, and preparedness are not mutually exclusive. Teaching my children, equipping myself, and trusting instincts doesn't mean living in constant terror. It means respecting reality and ensuring safety without sacrificing life's small joys. Even after years, I still remember the twitchy man, the wild-haired woman, the slick parking lot under street lamps, and the brief moment of terror when everyday errands turned into a lesson about human unpredictability. Walmart, once just a place for mundane shopping, became a symbol. A reminder that danger often wears ordinary clothes and moves quietly, and that survival depends on noticing the smallest signs before it's too late. It's not about living in fear, it's about living aware. Life doesn't always announce danger in obvious ways. Often the greatest threats are subtle, ordinary, and easy to dismiss. Awareness, vigilance, and trust in your instincts are essential, not to live in fear but to navigate the world safely. Protecting yourself and loved ones requires paying attention to the small signs and acting decisively when intuition signals something is wrong. Ordinary spaces can hide extraordinary risk, and preparation is the difference between being a victim and staying safe. I didn't exactly plan on working nights, but life has a way of pushing you into decisions that feel more like survival than choice. My name is Daniel Reeves, 24, dropped out of college halfway through my sophomore year, and carrying student loan debt that never seemed to shrink. Nights at Walmart Neighborhood Market were quiet, almost eerily so, and I picked up extra shifts because the extra money helped cover rent, groceries, and the occasional late-night coffee run. Still, there was a weight that settled over the store after 10 p.m. Empty aisles, the constant fluorescent hum, the distant mechanical beeps of scanners and fridges. It made you feel small, exposed. That Friday started like any other. I clocked in around 11, rolling a cart full of stock down the produce aisle, earbuds in to keep my mind occupied. Outside, the parking lot was quiet except for the occasional passing car. I'd learned to enjoy the solitude in small bursts, the way a quiet store can feel like a world of its own. But that night, the air carried an unfamiliar tension, one that prickled the back of my neck. I chalked it up to stress, to the way the lights always made shadows look bigger than they were. It was about 15 minutes past 11 when the sliding doors opened, snapping me out of my thoughts. A man stepped in wearing a black ski mask and a leather jacket, moving fast, and for a moment I froze. My brain screamed the obvious. He's armed, he's serious, don't do anything stupid. And then he barked the words that made the blood drain from my face. Nobody move, empty the registers. Everything in me went still. Hands shaking, I followed the protocol drilled into me from months of night shift training. Comply, stay calm, keep the customer behind me safe, don't provoke. My fingers fumbled across the cash drawer, sliding bills toward him. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, echoing against the sterile tile and fluorescent light. He wasn't satisfied. The words cut sharper this time. The safe. Open it now, I stammered, voice cracking. It's on a timer. I can't, even if I wanted to. He cursed, clearly frustrated, shoving the cash into a backpack. And then he was gone, the doors sliding shut behind him. For a moment, I just stood there, staring, hands frozen above the alarm button under the counter. Then I hit it, my palms sweaty, and called the police. When the officers arrived minutes later, their calm professionalism clashed with the adrenaline still coursing through me. We reviewed the security footage together, and that's when something gnawed at the edges of my mind. 2 days earlier, a middle-aged man had been in the store, asking me oddly specific questions about closing hours, camera angles, and security procedures. Watching the footage frame by frame, the detective paused. There was a connection between the two men. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. Their glances, the way they moved, the way they communicated outside the frame, it was deliberate. After that night, I tried to return to normal life, but normal had shifted. The store that had once felt mundane now carried a lingering tension. Every late-night shift, every empty aisle reminded me of the man in the ski mask and the feeling of helplessness when danger is in your face and you have no choice but to comply. Detective Lauren Mason called a few days later. "We found a white panel van," she said, voice clipped but serious. She described the contents: camping gear, merchandise from multiple stores, 3 men inside. One of them was Harold Benton, the same man who had questioned me days before. Hearing that name sent a shiver down my spine. He sat calm in custody, muttering the same cryptic phrase over and over. "There is a devil all the time." Something in his composure, the way he repeated those words like a mantra, left me uneasy in a way that the ski mask never had. In the following weeks, the media covered the arrest lightly, but the details were enough to keep me awake at night. Every knock at the door, every car passing too slowly in the lot, felt like a potential threat. I quit Walmart, moved to warehouse work, and avoided late-night shifts as much as possible. Still, the memory lingered, an imprint that refused to fade. Even mundane errands became exercises in vigilance. Grocery stores, gas stations, convenience stores. I watched the people around me in a way I hadn't before. I recognized that fear isn't always about panic. Sometimes it's quiet and insidious, shaping your movements and choices without your noticing. Years passed, and I tried to convince myself that I had moved on. I learned to live with the memory, to compartmentalize it. My apartment, a modest studio behind a used car dealership, became my fortress of routine. Friends joked about my cautious habits, checking doors, walking with keys in hand. But I didn't mind. I knew better than to ignore instincts honed under duress. One humid summer evening in 2021, I attended a candlelight vigil in memory of 2 robbery victims killed in another town. The vigil was somber, quiet, the flickering flames of candles casting long shadows. I thought I was attending as a witness to others' grief, but something caught my eye. A figure standing in the parking lot across from the church, partially hidden in shadow. My stomach twisted. The sleeves were rolled up and I froze. A snake tattoo coiled around the forearm, identical to the one I'd seen in the van photos connected to Harold's crew. Panic gripped me, a familiar surge of adrenaline and fear. I questioned my own mind. Was it really him? Or my imagination twisting shadows into the shape of past terror? I left the vigil early, heart hammering, eyes constantly scanning the lot, pulse rattling in my chest. That night, sleep eluded me, and even the comfort of familiar walls couldn't chase away the unease. From that moment, the lesson was undeniable. Crimes don't always end when the perpetrators are caught. Faces linger, and the potential for danger is never fully gone. I started carrying a small notebook in my jacket pocket, jotting down unusual occurrences, license plates, faces that seemed out of place. I avoided empty streets at night and always had a contingency plan when entering public spaces. Work, even at the warehouse, became an exercise in situational awareness. I noticed patterns, how some people loiter, how movement can communicate intent, how appearances can mask threats. I realized that life is unpredictable, and the ordinary can quickly turn dangerous. My paranoia was less about irrational fear and more about preparedness. Each habit, each precaution, was a buffer against chance. The hardest part isn't the memory of the robbery, or even seeing the man in the shadows again. It's realizing how fragile a sense of safety can be. Ordinary days, quiet errands, and peaceful evenings can become testing grounds for instincts and resilience. I carry the lessons with me: vigilance, caution, and trust in intuition. Not to live in fear, but to live aware. Even now, years later, I still remember the ski mask, the black leather jacket, Harold Benton's calm composure, and the white panel van stuffed with stolen goods. I recognize the truth that some dangers never fully disappear. They linger in subtle ways, shaping our actions, influencing our choices, reminding us that preparedness is as much about mental alertness as physical readiness. Life is unpredictable, and threats don't always announce themselves. But awareness, caution, and instinct can give you the edge needed to protect yourself and others. Danger is often subtle, disguised in ordinary places and mundane interactions. True safety doesn't come from luck or ignoring instincts. It comes from vigilance, situational awareness, and preparedness. Understanding that threats can linger even after justice is served allows us to act decisively and responsibly, protecting ourselves and those we care about without succumbing to fear. Life is unpredictable, but awareness can make all the difference. I'd been working late shifts at Tony's Diner for a few months, frying burgers, flipping pancakes, and cleaning up the endless mess college students leave behind. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and the tips helped cover some of my student loans. That Friday night, March 17, 2006, my shift had ended around 10 p.m. I felt that familiar exhaustion sinking into my bones, but when my phone buzzed with a call from Luke, I knew I'd be dragging myself into trouble anyway. "Hey man, done torturing yourself over there?" His voice carried that infuriating mix of teasing and excitement that made it hard to say no. Luke was a delivery driver with a mischievous streak. He loved dragging people into things they didn't plan on doing. "Come grab a drink before you pass out. Megan's coming too." Megan. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening at the thought. She was the kind of girl who laughed at my dry humor, brushing her hair behind her ear, and made me feel lighter than I had in weeks. I agreed, feeling both dread and excitement, knowing my body wanted sleep, but my brain craved distraction. We met at a small diner near the corner of Main and Walnut. Luke had already claimed a booth, and Megan was sitting there with a grin. I could tell she'd been laughing at something Luke had said, but when she saw me, she tilted her head, her brown hair in a messy bun. I smiled, trying to sound casual as we grabbed greasy burgers and coffee. Our conversation bounced between college woes, part-time job frustrations, and little jokes that made us lean closer without even realizing it. The hours melted away in laughter, and I felt an unusual warmth, the sort you don't notice until it's gone. After finishing, Luke, ever the instigator, suggested we swing by Walmart. "Just snacks for the ride home," he said. That sounded harmless, though I could sense an underlying plan to drag us into some trivial chaos. The streets were nearly empty as we drove, and when we pulled into the Walmart parking lot around 10:30 p.m., the lot was dimly lit, slick from recent rain. The sense of quiet made me uneasy even before we stepped inside. The store was almost deserted. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as we walked past aisles stacked high with cereal boxes, laundry detergent, and discounted Halloween decorations left over from last year. Luke wandered ahead jokingly, as though guarding us from some invisible threat. Megan and I stuck close together, sharing small jokes, lingering glances, and the kind of silent communication that made me acutely aware of her presence. There was a rhythm to our movements, a closeness I hadn't expected, a fluttering in my chest. Then I noticed him. A dirty-looking man stood near the electronics section, leaning against a shelf, muttering under his breath. His eyes, dark and intense, stayed locked on Megan in a way that made my stomach twist. Luke noticed first. "Hey, buddy. Need help finding something?" His voice was casual but firm. The man's gaze flicked to him, then back to Megan before slowly retreating into the next aisle. Megan shivered and pressed her hand against my arm. "Do you think he's dangerous?" she whispered. I swallowed hard, a mixture of protectiveness and a strange thrill surging through me. "Let's stick together," I said, guiding her toward the checkout while Luke lingered, keeping an eye on the man's direction. Even as we moved through the aisles, I couldn't shake the sense that we were being watched. Walmart at night had a strange emptiness that amplified every shadow, every sound. It wasn't fear of the store itself. It was the awareness that danger could lurk in the quiet, in a person standing too still, muttering to themselves, waiting. The checkout line felt slower than usual. the fluorescent lights above flickering intermittently. My palms were sweaty as I scanned snacks, bags rustling with every motion. Megan's hand brushed mine as she adjusted a bag, and I felt a surge of protective instinct, almost primal. Luke was still ahead, occasionally glancing back, trying to keep a sense of casualness about the situation. But I knew he was tense too. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for a few distant cars. The air was cool and damp, the wind slicing across our faces. My heart jumped when I saw the man again, standing near the exit, motionless, just watching. Megan grabbed my hand tightly and I whispered sharply, "Move." Every step toward the car felt like walking through invisible tension. He didn't follow, not yet, but the sense of his presence made me tense. Luke climbed in behind us, hands slamming the steering wheel, muttering, "He's been creeping on Megan for way too long." His face was pale, serious in a way that was almost frightening, considering how often he made light of situations. Once inside the car, I locked the doors and exhaled shakily. The relief was temporary, like a shallow breath before the plunge. Megan leaned against me, quiet and tense, the warmth of her head on my shoulder grounding me amidst the adrenaline rush. The night air felt heavier outside the vehicle, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. We drove in silence, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the distant drip of rain from the lot lights. My thoughts spun uncontrollably, the man's stare, the way he had lingered. How easily someone could become a threat when nobody expected it. I felt the strange combination of anger and adrenaline, the protective instincts amplified by closeness and concern. When we finally reached Luke's apartment, we shared coffee, trying to laugh off the tension, but the unease lingered, a residue in the corners of our minds. Megan rested her head against my shoulder again, and I felt a sense of intimacy that had transformed from flirtation into quiet safety. It was an intimacy born of fear, adrenaline, and shared vulnerability, a bond that neither of us had anticipated. Even as we parted ways later that night, I kept replaying the man's stare in my mind, the knowledge that not every stranger will step back when they have the chance to linger. Walmart had been ordinary before, just a store, a stop on the way home. That night it became a place tied to vigilance, caution, and an awareness of the unpredictable. The next week, Walmart occupied my thoughts in strange, uncomfortable ways. Every time I passed a store, even in daylight, my mind automatically scanned aisles, shadows, and people who lingered too long. Megan's texts were frequent, gentle reminders of concern and shared experience. Even in her playful tone, there was an underlying awareness of the night's tension. I realized that part of me had changed. The adrenaline hadn't just faded, it had left a mark, sharpening my instincts. I noticed details others overlooked, a person standing too still, a glance lingering too long, the quiet moments when someone might be observing without intention to engage. It was like seeing the world through a lens I couldn't turn off. Megan and I grew closer, not just flirtation, but a deeper connection, one forged in the heat of tension and fear. I found myself wanting to shield her in ways I hadn't realized before. I became more aware of my surroundings, more conscious of potential risks. It was exhausting sometimes, but it felt necessary. Luke, true to form, laughed off my growing vigilance, though I could see the unease in his eyes when we recounted the night. It was a shared lesson, that danger could exist quietly in ordinary places, and that being aware, cautious, and protective wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Months passed, and the memory of that night became something of a constant companion. Walmart trips became exercises in awareness. Even with mundane errands, I carried the lingering residue of fear and vigilance. I understood more than ever that safety is a fragile construct, contingent on attention, instinct, and timing. Megan and I continued seeing each other, our bond solidified. Fear had created intimacy in a way laughter alone never could. That night had transformed ordinary moments, the casual walk through aisles, the small jokes, even the mundane act of shopping, into a memory etched with awareness, vigilance, and closeness. I began to reflect on courage differently. It wasn't about confronting danger recklessly. It was about presence of mind, alertness, and protecting those you care about. That night had shown me that fear, when acknowledged and acted upon responsibly, could forge connections and lessons that lasted far beyond adrenaline and panic. Years later, I still think about that night. It was more than a scary encounter in a Walmart parking lot. It was a lesson in awareness, trust, and the way shared fear can bond people. Megan and I stayed close, our relationship a quiet testament to how moments of danger can illuminate the value of connection and protection. Luke eventually moved away, but I kept that vigilance alive, a subtle but essential part of my outlook. The man's stare, the empty aisles, and the flickering fluorescent light stayed with me as reminders that ordinary places could hold the extraordinary risk, and ordinary moments could transform into lessons that last a lifetime. Life can place us in seemingly ordinary spaces that suddenly feel dangerous. True courage is not the absence of fear, but acting thoughtfully despite it. Awareness, vigilance, and protecting those you care about are crucial skills. Shared fear can create trust and intimacy, showing that even in frightening circumstances, connection and responsibility are the strongest defenses we have. I still remember that morning like it was yesterday, March 14th, 2023. The chill in the air made me pull my jacket a little tighter as I walked into the Walmart on Ridgeway Avenue in Springfield. I had just turned 19. High school was behind me, and my parents were adamant, "Start working now. College can wait." I wanted independence, and at the time, Walmart felt like the right place, steady hours, benefits, and the sense that I could finally handle my own life. The store smelled the same as always, a mix of floor polish, canned goods, and that faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I clocked in, flashed my ID at the front, and headed to electronics, my assigned department. At first, everything was routine: stocking shelves, answering questions about HDMI cords or TV mounts, helping customers find controllers. I liked the rhythm of it, the repetitive motions, the small victories when I helped someone locate a missing charger. It gave me a strange comfort after years of school chaos. I started to notice the people around me. Maya, a part-time cashier, had a laugh that could cut through the early morning grogginess. She often worked the late-night shifts and would cover for me if I ever needed a quick break. Her humor was sharp, witty, and completely unfiltered, the kind that made stocking shelves feel less like a chore. We would exchange jokes while folding discount DVDs into neat rows or restocking the video game section. But then, Ethan joined. Ethan, the new department manager, had this confident swagger that immediately made him the center of attention. I first noticed him when he lingered too long around Sophie, a young cashier. He offered her friendly shoulder massages as the customer line grew longer behind them. Sophie laughed awkwardly, but there was a tension in her eyes I couldn't ignore. I froze, unsure if I should step in. The store was supposed to feel safe, predictable, even boring at times. But Ethan made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't shake. Weeks passed, and Ethan's behavior only escalated. One evening I walked into the stockroom expecting boxes of paper towels or seasonal displays. Instead, I found Ethan cornering Jenna, one of the floor associates. She looked frozen, her back against the wall, eyes wide with panic. My stomach twisted. I didn't know whether to yell, to run, or to wait until he left. My instinct was screaming at me to act, but fear rooted me to the spot. Later, I cornered Maya in the break room. "Something's wrong," I whispered, voice low, eyes darting around to make sure no one else heard. We debated what to do. Fear of retaliation gnawed at me. Ethan was charming in public, commanding in meetings, and clearly respected by corporate. But leaving it unspoken felt like betrayal. Finally, I reported the incidents. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and angry all at once. By the next morning, Jenna was gone, fired without explanation. Ethan's smug smile when I walked past said more than words ever could. Rage collided with guilt. I had acted, but what had it cost someone else? The tension in the store shifted. I could feel my co-workers' eyes on me, whispers behind my back. Some defended him, some avoided me entirely. My comfort, my routine, even my friendships seemed to fray in the fluorescent-lit aisles where I had once felt secure. Standing up for right had consequences I hadn't anticipated, and it scared me more than anything Ethan had ever done. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and vigilance. Every time I walked into the store, I felt a knot in my stomach. Ethan's absence didn't bring relief. It brought a haunting sense of unfinished business. My co-workers treated me differently. Maya still offered quiet support in the back room, but even she seemed hesitant, as if being associated with my actions might draw invisible lines of conflict. I remember one Tuesday standing near the electronics counter, sorting through new shipments of laptops and routers, when I noticed the tension radiating off of my team. Even simple greetings were tinged with awkwardness. "Hey, good morning," I said to Sophie, who barely looked up from her register. "Morning," she muttered, eyes down. The warmth and camaraderie I had felt weeks ago had dissolved into whispers, sideways glances, and suspicion. Then there were the small incidents that reminded me of Ethan's lingering influence. Boxes left misplaced, reports delayed. Even managers who had once smiled now avoided direct eye contact. It wasn't just the fear of confrontation. It was a subtle, silent resistance, as if my act of integrity had disrupted a delicate ecosystem I hadn't fully understood. One evening, after my shift ended, I lingered in the parking lot, staring at the orange glow of the streetlights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Maya joined me, sipping a bottle of water. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "People are going to be angry, scared, or defensive. It's normal. Don't let it eat you alive." I nodded, but her reassurance barely touched the hollow ache inside. Doing what was right had isolated me, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to handle it. I decided to double-check corporate policies looking for support. I printed forms, read guidelines about harassment, and made a mental note to escalate further if needed. Knowledge helped, but it didn't erase the discomfort, the silent stares, or the fear that Ethan could somehow manipulate the story again. Then came the day I finally confronted Ethan privately. I found him stacking boxes in the back aisle, clipboard in hand, a casual smile plastered on his face. "Careful," he sneered when I approached. "You could lose more than a job." Rage surged through me, hot and relentless, but I held my voice steady. "You're fired," I said internally. But out loud I maintained a calm tone, recounting the incidents, escalating the report to district management. Ethan's expression flickered. A hint of unease, a sliver of fear, perhaps, but he maintained his smug exterior. Weeks later, corporate confirmed he was gone. Fired, but the cost lingered. Co-workers whispered, avoided me. Some even outright defended him. My once familiar aisles felt like alien terrain. My sense of security had been fractured. I began to notice subtle patterns of human behavior I had never seen before. How fear could silence. How power could protect the wrong people. How doing the right thing sometimes required walking alone. I started keeping notes, documenting each interaction, preparing myself for any future encounters. Knowledge became my armor in a workplace that suddenly seemed more treacherous than I had imagined. Isolation breeds reflection. I spent nights replaying every moment. The cornered associate, the whispered warnings from Maya, the helpless look on Jenna's face. I questioned my courage. Was I brave enough to continue, or had I simply survived by accident? I wrote down each interaction, each fear, each subtle intimidation, as if chronicling the story would somehow clarify my role in it. One Thursday, while arranging electronics displays, I caught a reflection in the glass of the security cameras. A new team member, unaware of Ethan's history, moved confidently past the aisles. I felt protective, a strange maternal instinct toward anyone who could be vulnerable. I realized then that integrity wasn't just about reporting wrongdoers. It was about vigilance, about noticing the nuances in everyday interactions that most people ignore. Maya and I formed an unspoken alliance, sharing quiet strategies to support one another without attracting undue attention. "Watch for the pattern," she said one late night, stacking DVDs. "People like Ethan leave footprints if you know where to look." Her words resonated. I began paying closer attention. Who lingered too long? Who smiled too casually? Who walked as if they owned the space? It was exhausting, but enlightening. I was learning more than I expected about human behavior, manipulation, and courage. Then came the whispering. Rumors spread about me, subtle accusations questioning my judgment or loyalty. I felt cornered, but I refused to compromise my ethics. One evening, a coworker approached me near the stockroom. "You know, Ethan wasn't all bad," she whispered. I met her gaze steadily. "I did what I had to," I said. No apology, no hesitation. Her face fell, but I didn't waver. My moral compass was clearer than ever. By midsummer, my responsibilities shifted. I was given more autonomy, but also more scrutiny. I realized the weight of integrity wasn't a badge, it was a burden. Every decision had consequences, visible or invisible, and I had to navigate them carefully. Yet, each time I helped a new associate, intervened quietly in a tense moment, or stood firm, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. My actions, though small, mattered. The final weeks before I quit were some of the hardest. I felt both empowered and exhausted. Corporate had my back regarding Ethan, but the social fallout remained. Whispering coworkers, avoided eye contact, subtle accusations, they reminded me that courage often isolates you. My shifts became exercises in endurance, patience, and careful observation. One evening, as I stocked the video game shelves, I overheard a customer complain loudly about a missing console. I stepped forward, resolved the issue quickly, and felt a small sense of normalcy returning. It reminded me why I had chosen this job in the first place: independence, responsibility, and growth. Even amidst fear and tension, there were moments of clarity where I knew I could navigate both human and professional challenges. Maya and I shared a quiet moment during the late-night close. "You did good," she said. "People will forget Ethan, forget the whispers, but they won't forget how you acted." I nodded, realizing that even if the recognition wasn't immediate, my actions had left a mark. Courage doesn't always get applause. Sometimes it just preserves your own integrity. The day I quit, I walked out of Walmart with a mixture of relief and pride. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the aisles empty and quiet. I had faced fear, intimidation, and betrayal, but I had also discovered the strength within myself to act ethically. Walking past the electronics section one last time, I remembered Ethan's smug smile and Jenna's terrified eyes. I had acted, and in doing so, I had protected others even at personal cost. As I drove away, I realized the moral of my experience. Integrity is often tested in ordinary moments. Courage is not about grand gestures, but about standing firm when it matters most, even when the world seems against you. I had learned that doing the right thing might isolate you, might cost you comfort, but it preserves the one thing no one can take: your self-respect. I didn't know what the future held: college, a new job, new challenges. But I carried with me the lesson that standing up for what is right, even in the face of fear and adversity, is always worth it. True courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to act ethically despite it. Integrity often comes at a personal cost, but it preserves the most valuable thing of all: your sense of self. I had always imagined my first real assignment as a state health inspector would be routine: checking temperatures, sanitization logs, labeling dates, and occasionally asking a few questions about procedures. After weeks of training, I finally had my own inspections under my belt. Thursday, June 15th, 2023 felt like the perfect start. I arrived at Walmart on Brookside Avenue in Akron, Ohio, just after 8, the evening rush thinning as the night crowd settled in. I felt confident, dressed in my khaki uniform, clipboard in hand, ready to show I could handle responsibility. At first, everything felt normal. Customers pushed carts down wide aisles, children's laughter echoed near the toy section, and the announcement chime over the PA reminded me that the store was alive, but orderly. I smiled at employees as I passed, introduced myself, and started at the deli. Cold cases were clean, meats properly labeled, slicers sanitized. The bakery smelled of fresh bread, labels were correct and surfaces wiped down. I felt a subtle reassurance that the training I had done mattered. Then I reached the butcher section. The first thing I noticed was the smell, raw meat mixed with a faint chemical scent of disinfectant, but beneath it something sour lingered. The cutting tables had streaks I couldn't ignore, knives were left out without proper sheaths, and the floor was sticky in patches. I took a step closer, clipboard ready, pretending to examine the temperature logs. Greg, the butcher, noticed me immediately. He was a tall, broad man in his late 40s, wearing a blood-smeared apron over a t-shirt, and his eyes narrowed as he leaned against the counter. "You're new," he said, voice low and gravelly. "Don't tell me how to run my counter." I swallowed hard. "I'm not here to tell you what to do," I said carefully. "I'm just checking that procedures meet state standards. Sanitation, storage, safety for customers." Greg's glare deepened. 20 years I've been cutting meat. 20 years. And now some kid shows up telling me how to do my job. Step off. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to stay calm. I noted the violations, moving deliberately, never getting too close. He followed my every step with that hard stare, muttering under his breath. I smiled politely, checked the knives, measured the counters, and logged temperatures. Each note I wrote felt like a small act of defiance, even as fear tickled at the back of my mind. By the time I left, the adrenaline had settled into a dull ache. I convinced myself it was just part of the job. Everyone has a grumpy employee sometimes, right? But when I got back home that night, parking my car under the flickering streetlight, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. Something about Greg had left an imprint, like his eyes had followed me even after I stepped through the sliding doors. A week later, I returned for a follow-up inspection. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the evening crowd was thinner than before, letting the store feel cavernous. I wasn't as calm as I wanted to be. Something about Greg's reaction last week had lingered in my chest, a subtle unease that grew heavier with every step I took toward the butcher counter. Greg was already there, knives glinting under the harsh lights, arms crossed, a grin stretched across his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Back so soon?" he said casually. "You really like checking up on me, huh?" I cleared my throat, just making sure everything meets the standards. "Nothing personal," I said, voice steady but hands shaking slightly as I adjusted my clipboard. He laughed, low and unsettling, echoing across the empty corner. "You're cute when you try to be professional," he said, leaning against the counter. His presence was oppressive, and I realized just how quickly intimidation could spread without a single raised hand. I forced myself to continue inspecting, noting every knife out of place, every floor streak, every violation I had seen before. I finished quickly, eager to leave the section. As I walked out toward the main aisles, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Its engine was running, and it stayed there for far longer than seemed necessary. My stomach dropped. My parents called later that night, panic in their voices, saying a tall man had been loitering near our home. My mind raced. Greg. Could it be him? The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. "You can't just watch me. I watch you too." My pulse raced, chest tight, hands trembling as I held the paper. The sense of safety I had taken for granted, both at work and at home, had vanished. The following days were surreal. Every sound in my apartment made me jump. The creak of the floor, the rustle of leaves outside, even the mail slot. I started double-checking locks multiple times, scanning my surroundings, hyper-aware of strangers. Sleep was fractured. I couldn't stop replaying Greg's stare, his laugh, and that final note. I knew I had to act carefully. Reporting the harassment to my supervisors was a necessary step, but it didn't feel enough. I also took precautionary measures, installing additional locks, keeping a baseball bat near the door, and setting up temporary cameras around my apartment. I tried to maintain normalcy, but the anxiety gnawed at the edges of my day. Returning to Walmart for any inspection became a test of nerve. I noticed every unusual look, every lingering glance. I kept my phone in hand during inspections, ready to call for help at the first sign of danger. It wasn't just about procedures anymore, it was about self-preservation. 2 nights after receiving the note, I returned home to find my front door slightly ajar. My breath caught, and adrenaline surged. I held the baseball bat tight and called 911, careful not to alert whoever might be inside. Within minutes, police arrived, sweeping through my apartment. Greg was apprehended before he could do anything. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by exhaustion, fear, and the knowledge that my life had been infiltrated in ways I hadn't anticipated. After that night, I stayed with friends, unable to sleep alone. Even when I returned home days later, the fear lingered. Walking past the butcher section, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I felt a visceral shiver. Routine tasks that had once been mundane, inspections, grocery runs, trips to the store, now carried an edge of vigilance. Months passed, but the memory never fully faded. I had learned that courage doesn't look like heroics in the movies. Sometimes it looks like steady hands, careful notes, and the refusal to ignore warning signs. I continued my inspections with diligence, but always with awareness, always with a plan for safety. I realized that doing the right thing can make you a target, but integrity is worth the risk. Greg's actions had shaken me, but they also taught me resilience, preparation, and the importance of trusting instincts. The fear lingered like a shadow, but it had become a tool, a reminder to be vigilant without letting terror rule my life. Standing up for what's right can be frightening, but courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite it. Safety requires vigilance, awareness, and the willingness to protect oneself while maintaining integrity. Evil often hides in ordinary places, and awareness can be the strongest defense.